Everybody, happy birthday. Today is the 6th anniversary of the very first watch party we did here at Historians of the Movies. 6 years ago, July 15th, 2018, we all got together and watched National Treasure for the very first time, setting off what became HATM. And for this special day, I wanted something special. So I invited on three amazing people. I invited on Joanne Freeman, our great friend, professor of history at Yale University, alongside Cormac and Marianne Wibberley. They are the screenwriters of National Treasure. They were there that night. They wrote the film. They came along. We talked about this movie today, the creation of it, the history behind it, what it means. These guys are amazing. I wanted to do this for you, and they were so amazing to take the time and talk about this movie that we all love so much, that helped spawn this community that has lasted for the last 6, and as of tomorrow, going on 7 years. I can't thank the three of them enough for taking the time to sit down and talk to us about this. So sit back and relax, because we're going to steal the Declaration of Independence. National Treasure is next on Historians of the Movies podcast. Hi. 6 years in, now we're like doing high. So I'm so excited that you guys are here. I also have a bone to pick with all three of you. We are just alluding to this a second ago. I blame each of you for like the bane of my existence now, which is Historians of the Movies, which became like this thing after we live tweeted this movie 6 years ago on a whim. I remember talking to Joanne, like the couple days before. She didn't even have a Netflix subscription. Joanne, I'm just telling you this now.
I mean, that's okay.
I was like, we should watch this. And then everybody came on, you guys included. All of us were there that night. And I thought, hey, we'll just live tweet this movie. That was like, we didn't even have a term for live tweet.
That's true. We didn't have the term for it. But I also felt like I was the only human being who had never seen National Treasure. Because it was one of those cases where, we were talking about it and I said at some point, I've never seen it, National Treasure. And then that got a sort of, wait, what? What? You haven't seen National Treasure? It's one of those iconic history movies, which I think is what led Jason to have the great idea.
Well, first of all, it's actually you guys' idea because this movie is so much fun. And every time I talk about this film, and there was a real reason why like HAT became this thing, and I guess we should introduce ourselves at some point in time, but whatever. Every time I talk about this movie, as a scholar, as a historian, right, and I bring this up to other historians, I'm telling you guys to a person, and it's 20 years now, like you've probably been hearing this over and over again, how much people love this film. I mean, especially historians. Like every time I talk to, oh my God, I've never talked to a historian who does not love this film. Are you serious?
No, I mean, we didn't know that historians loved it too. I mean, I know the historians that we talked to on Twitter that night did. and it was pretty scary for us because we didn't have, we had no resources. We weren't historians. We were using our daughter's 4th grade history books. Cobbled together. So it was really fun interacting with all the historians, telling us what kind of nails they would really be using or whatever, all that stuff. That was like, it was so interesting to us, and we were like, oh, it's too bad we didn't have. But anyway, so it was scary at first, and then I was like, oh my God, these people are so smart. I'm so terrified. Cormac, they're asking these questions, blah blah blah, and then you guys were all just so nice, and you were just so fun and funny, and you were so open to like.
And I was so caught up in the movie, right? I mean, so it was the first time I saw it. So I was just responding in the moment to things that like, wait, lemon juice.
I know, the lemons.
That's a standard from cartoon days.
Oh my God. No, I love it.
God. We rewatched National Treasure 2 last night, and it was funny to see how they manhandled that 500-year-old Olmec play. Oh my God, we're just like, you can't. I mean, in the day we didn't think about, any of that. Anyway, but it was fun, so it didn't matter, whatever. But anyway.
No, I have so many questions for you guys. But before we jump in and all this kind of stuff, because I just love these movies. Maybe we should probably introduce ourselves and so forth. So people coming in, Joanne, you're the first person I see on my screen. You want to go first, and then Marianne and Cormac, you guys want to go?
Sure. Joanne Freeman. I teach early American history and particularly politics at Yale University. I'll stop there.
It's amazing. And we are the Wibberleys, Cormac and
What else
Marianne.
did I say, Jason?
Cormac and Marianne, and we were, God, I don't know what number writer we were, but we were the writers that came on National Treasure after it had been in development for a very long time, and we got it greenlit.
I can tell you, we were the fourth writer. There was the first person, we had no idea, and this is an arbitration. The first person they hired was a historian from UCLA. We never had seen the draft. And the second person they had hired was Jim Kauf, who
did
early in our career, we were lucky enough that he had bought one of our spec scripts or brought it in and bought it. And we were big fans of his. He had done Stakeout in a movie called American Dreamer. That we loved,
with Joe Beth
Williams that we loved. And then they had hired Emax Fry. So the first two, I think John Turtletop was the producer, and then it moved over to Jerry Bruckheimer. And Jerry, I believe, hired Emax Fry. So when we came on board, this was years later, and
it had been dead.
It had been dead, and people were like, "Don't do this project; it'll never get."
It's a dead project. It's just development hell. You'll never get this movie made.
You'll never get this
because
movie
of the
made.
script, because of the people, different people writing the script.
I think the script wasn't there yet. Not that people were all great.
We can go through sort of the genesis of what was pitched to us was when we sat down with the producers. They said, "Oh, it's a really funny project where they get the Declaration of Independence and it's a treasure hunt and they're using it to wipe mustard off of their face or they're dropping it in the streets and all these sort of things." And we were like, "Oh my God,
you can't do that."
They were thinking, "Oh my God!" And then then they finally showed us the script, and I think Marianne was just reminding me this morning. I think at the end of the first script we read, they had ruined the Declaration of Independence, and luckily they had found another broadside at the end
in the treasure chamber.
But it still wouldn't survive that.
I would have turned it off as soon as that truck tire ran over.
I would not have survived.
By the way, Jason Herbert also, I noticed introductions wise, Jason, I noticed that one of our characters is named Dr. Herbert in National Treasure.
Yeah, and I want to be, for the record, he does not get the girl. I have beef with that. I rewatched it this morning again. I've watched this film so many times, and we get to the Dr. Herbert. I'm like, thanks, guys. That you couldn't have known, but there's a Dr. Herbert. It's fine. It's fine.
So in the first draft that Marianne and I read, it opened with a dive off of Florida, and they were like, "This is
Florida."
Cool. And we're off of Florida. But we, being fans of Jim Kauf, said, "Can we just read what Jim Kauf had done?" And he had this thing in the Arctic, a ship in the Arctic.
Mm-hmm.
God, this is really interesting. Finding a ship in the Arctic.
It's not as sexy, but it's
you can't have your hero with his shirt off, but it's cool. So
it just felt right,
and it felt right. And Jim's draft, of course, had a lot of sense of humor, which we were attracted to. And as you know, John Turtletop's movies are so much of that and so much heart. And we were thrilled to be working with John because, again, we're fans of John's too. We love it.
With Jerry, John, Jim Kauf,
I like Jerry Bruckheimer, John Turtletop.
And those three, we disregarded whether our agents were begging us not to do it, and we just said we're going to do it. And we actually didn't, I don't know if it was just youth or what, but I don't know that we thought about, so many movies don't get made. So that wasn't like in the screenwriter's life. You do a lot of movies that don't get made. So that wasn't something, we wanted to
we did think about it because as we were writing it, we kept saying, no one's going to ever watch this movie. They're never going to make this movie.
That's true.
Is it a history movie?
Historians are all nodding their head.
Yeah.
No
Is it
one's
a caper
gonna read
movie?
my book.
What is this movie? Because who's going to want to have a history lesson? We were like, no one. They're never going to make it. That's what we thought.
Yeah, we did. And then when we saw it in the theater or at the premiere, and we were like, God, it's kind of like Ocean's 11 meets Amazing Race. There's like stuff in it that, for nerds, it kind of works, I hope. And then we were like, and so that's why I'm curious, like looking at you guys, you're historians, and you were watching the movie the first time, especially you, Joanne, because you had not even had any interest in seeing it in the theater. Like how did you, like, what hooked you when you were watching it? Was it the history, or was it like, are you a crazy Nick Cage fan like we are? That's the other thing, when we're crazy Nick Cage fans too. So,
I mean, I would say, when watching it the first time, all I knew about it was I had this idea that someone was holding the Declaration and holding it up, and people were shooting at it, going ping, 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 and that was about all I knew. To be totally honest with you, and actually, Jason, this is a codfish moment. Should I explain what that is?
yes.
Go for it.
Okay, so when we were doing another one of these episodes, we were talking about the Benjamin Franklin miniseries on Apple TV. And somewhere in the middle of it, I don't remember how or why, they began talking about codfish when maybe it was the Treaty of Paris. What's going to happen with the codfish? There's this codfish discussion. And I just lit up, because if you write about this time period, they're always talking about the frickin' codfish. And I was like, that's a history moment. And so basically codfish moments are moments when there's like some fact or something in the mix that if you know something, you're going to light up and say, oh, that's a thing I get and I like. And the first codfish moment, because I went back, I rewatched it today, and the first codfish moment is Charles Carroll, very beginning, right? And part of the reason that he was a codfish moment for me is just ridiculousness, which is he is always referred to as Charles Carroll of Carrollton, always.
Okay.
Like that, I couldn't tell you why. There must have been a lot of Charles Carrolls. But so I'm like, oh, there's Charles Carroll of Carrollton, which of course then made me laugh at myself and at the movie. But I kind of love the fact that he was the guy who beamed in and started your project. And then I thought, certainly there's detail here that I'm curious to see how it's going to play out. And particularly in the sense that most history-ish movies take the history very, very seriously. And for historians, that's usually not a good thing, because they take it seriously, but they're so focused on getting it right, and they don't. And so you're watching the movie. I've watched movies with historians. I'm not normally this person, but there'll be people saying, like, the bicycle was not invented until 1850. So if it takes itself really seriously, historians have all kinds of reasons to feel taken aback. But what's wonderful about this movie, and I guess this is what hooked me in, was that it's kind of making fun of the people looking for things and their historical knowledge, and that they know every fact under the sun in a nanosecond.
You're that Gates family. Yeah.
Well, right. And, Matlock is the scribe of the Second Continental Congress.
Yeah.
Okay. No human being is going to do that, or very few. But it doesn't take itself seriously, and that kind of poking fun at the little details that just come out of Nicolas Cage and the other characters, that grabbed me too. So it's fun. It's kind of making fun. And so I think it lets historians stand back and just enjoy it without feeling somehow that what they do is bound up in it.
That's nice to know. Yeah. I mean, we wrote it like, you say making fun, but actually we just were having fun because we just love.
It's apparent.
Yeah, we love all the factoids and the historical things, like when we stumbled on the Silence Do Good letters that were written by Franklin, all that stuff. Like, we had so much fun with that and figuring out how to work those in as clues. So that was fun. And then, of course, Nick Cage has that way.
the surprising moments for us that I don't know were in the script was like when Nick comes into the room where they sign the Declaration of Independence, and he stops, and there's so much reverence there and he brought so much weight to it, and him and John just they made it a moment, and you believe this Ben Gates, this means a lot to him. So those guys, they really brought all that, and I'm Jerry, of course, too. So
Jerry's.
So those are sort of like, you have the fun side, but you had that side too, and it took things very reverencing and seriously, and you're like, oh, this guy means it when he says it, and I believe this guy, collected George Washington buttons.
But that was a great moment too, right? Where he has the Declaration and he pauses and says, "This is the first time this has been back here since it was signed," or something along those lines. And I loved that partly because, as you're saying, it is a funny movie, but it's appreciating certainly the Declaration. But as a historian, what I liked about that, I guess that's another codfish moment. What I liked about that is we all have moments where we recognize the significance of something, or realize we're the first person to see something or put something together for the first time. And certainly my response is always like that. Oh my gosh. Like this, like I found a first person account of the Burr-Hamilton duel that no one has seen, right? And you stop and think, wow, like how could this be? So the excitement of that moment in the movie, that's a historian thing. That's a historian moment, because, and you might be the only person in the world who understands why it's exciting, but still the idea that, you're putting something together, and in the case of me and my colleagues from several hundred years ago, is pretty cool.
And I think Marianne and I kind of like that moment when, he spouts off whatever historical, and then he'd say, people don't talk like that anymore. and he says, but they think it, and
I love that line.
And he basically, I think people in the audience are, and we're not taking credit for that line, because I don't think we even came up with it.
I think that might have been our partner.
I want to say that was Ted.
I
want to say Ted Elliott did that line, and it just makes you go, yeah, because it calls it, again, Ben's an old-fashioned guy, but it makes everyone kind of feel like, yeah, maybe I'm a little old-fashioned too, and I kind of like that history.
Yeah.
I'm curious, and we don't have to do it right now, but at some point, I totally need to know what kind of research you guys did to write it. But now might not be the moment, Jason. I want to be led by you.
Oh, well, that's just a horrible idea. So I can tell you guys this. You're getting back to the idea. I want you to know this, because the idea, this whole historians of the movies thing that's been going on for like 6 years now happens only because of this film. And the reason for that, and I remember I would have a conversation. I always tell this adage about, there's a direct correlation between, say, Benjamin Franklin Gates and Indiana Jones. And we'll get into that in a second. Like, a friend of mine who is an archaeologist would always say, we've got Indiana Jones, and I'm like, well, we've got Benjamin Franklin Gates. You've got Harrison Ford, but we have Nick Cage, right? Yeah. And we always say that in jest, but the reality is, like I was saying earlier, every historian I know loves this film. And I remember, and I can tell you this is a very personal thing for me. I was in graduate school. I went back to get my doctorate later on. So it's 2018. I had moved away from the University of Minnesota, where I was doing my work, and I was living in Florida, and there wasn't a lot of folks around. And I got real active on Twitter, right? Because I needed to recreate some space for intellectuals. And one thing we kept seeing, like, this conversation about this movie kept coming up and up over the course of months. And then I remember seeing that it was on Netflix one night, and I was like, we should all just watch it. And everybody jumped on board with it. And I felt like, and we get to the levity of this film and things like that. And that's the reason why I think this is such a perfect film in so many different ways. Originally, the idea was like, we're going to watch this one night and kind of like just turn our brains off a little bit and just watch a movie that we like. And then this became like this avenue for like talking about movies and life and all this kind of stuff. But it strikes so many different
It had
tones.
the Greek chorus of a first-time watcher, right? So most of the people who knew it and had seen it and knew it was coming. And so they would be like, oh, she's going to hate this. And then I would see you. So that was part of it too, right? Was a historian in that moment having a different kind of engagement.
Yeah. And I still remember at one point, Jason, I think you tweeted, "We're trending," and I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah.
You were like, "Oh my God, HTAT, our hashtag was trending." So everybody tuned in, and aside from just the historians and us and some other fans that maybe follow, we didn't have many followers at the time, maybe a couple thousand. Like it wasn't, but we all of a sudden I was like, "Oh, that's interesting. We're trending. I don't know. That's cool. People are tuning in." So that was fun.
Yeah. Do you know how many times I get tagged in National Treasure related stuff between people? Like, just people send stuff to me just all, I mean, quite literally will mail me stuff at this point in time on the film as a result, but because of the night. And here's what the cool thing would happen. Like, yeah, I kind of taught Joanne to get a Netflix account to watch the movie, but I didn't really know Joanne well. Like, I think Joanne and I actually met like a week later in person in Cleveland, was it?
Some conference somewhere.
Sheer.
It was
right?
Sheer. I don't remember where it was. Cleveland sounds likely, at the elevators. I do remember
in the elevators. I turn around and there's this small person who's like 3 apples tall, bear hugging me, and I'm like, oh, it's you. But and this is what I love about this, right? Because what this film did was, because everybody loved this movie so much, people just started coming together as a result of this and creating like this idea of community. When I talk about HATM and stuff like that, it's always this idea of like, we do this together. And it's because of stuff like this, because of like this, like, I always felt that the cool thing was like, you could take these movies like National Treasure, like any number of things that people really love, right? And it helps to break down barriers. Like I'll tell you, as a graduate student, I'd never talk to Joanne. Otherwise, she was professor at Yale.
I would totally talk.
Yeah, of course you would, but I totally would have been freaked out, right? But then you're like, oh, we all like this movie. It became like this avenue for like, if you just like history, you like this, that, or the other, now you can like do this stuff. So, I mean, that's what you guys did.
It isn't just historians watching historians of the movies, but a lot of historians do. And the thing about historians is we spend most of our time in a room by ourselves looking at dead people's mail. Like that is what we do.
That is so depressing.
I know. Well, one of my graduate advisors said you have to just be a little off kilter to be a historian, because you're going to spend a lot of your life in a room by yourself looking at old pieces of paper. And probably there's something to that. But given it's a population of people who that's what they do, and they can come together and watch movies together, and it became a space of people sort of together engaged in something. That was for historians. I think that's a cool thing.
I love that you guys do that. It's like, it's amazing how many people had diaries back then, and thank God they did.
Oh heavens, yes.
We have
social
Twitter
media,
and social media, but people like to write down their thoughts a lot and their mail a lot, and it's fascinating for us, to read those books that you guys do and just go, wow. It's like the Smith song "Cemetery Gates." You go, all those people, those lives, where are they now? They live the same lives. These diaries. Where are they now? It makes you think. But when you're talking about research for us, I know that Marianne jokes that we had the 4th grade, our daughter's 4th grade, and that's not a joke. We did have the 4th grade history book, but we would go back then. We didn't really have the internet like we had it now, where there wasn't.
Right.
Well, we went to the library, and I remember we went to. When they screened this movie, they had a screening for critics, and we'd never done that, where we have to sit and talk to critics about your movie.
They always want to talk to actors. They don't want to talk to the writers.
So Marianne and Marianne's very detailed oriented. So we had like 3 binders that were this thick with research that we had done, and we sat them on the table, and the critics never asked one question about anything about the history or where that came from.
But they did ask. Go ahead.
They did. The foreign critics said, "Well, why would we want to watch this movie? It's about American history," and we were just, it's about a family.
Well, you answered it. You did. You
redemption, and I think everyone can feel that there's something in their family that they would like to fix or redeem or prove right, or cure the ghost. And so,
yeah, he answered that very eloquently. I froze up. I was like, oh shit, foreigners aren't going to want to see our movie. That's what I thought.
I didn't. Well, we did kind of steal the decorations from France, and we did get some of the stuff. You guys should like it, and I don't know. We never really. we never really had the answer.
But it isn't
we
just
did-
about American history, right? It's about history and in some way like reverence for history, and that doesn't have to be
Mhm.
American.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the reverence for history, like that. What Nick sold and John sold and Jerry sold, that we were like amazed by. But like I said, we did a lot of research, but that scene, the Charles Carroll, that was in the draft that Jim Calf had written, and
I think he even had the 55 and iron pen.
he had 55 in iron pen, and he had Charles Carroll. I don't even know if we did any research to see if Charles Carroll dropped dead on the steps of the White House.
We knew it was the last time.
But we knew that, at that point, we kind of figured out, well, that's got to be the worst curse for some family that started handing that down. And that's got to, make that family seem crazy. And Marianne and I, why we kept saying, it's got to be Nick Cage, because he had done that hot honeymoon in Vegas where he was just like, but I had a royal flush. He does that thing like, oh my God, the craziest lines he can deliver.
Yeah, when he,
And so
With a kind of sincerity, right? With a really
kind of sincerity.
Oh my gosh.
yeah.
They're going to be quartered and drawn. And my favorite, have their entrails cut out and burned. The way he does it is just like you never saw it that way, like when you're writing it. And he might have even added to it. I can't remember, but just the way he does all that kind of stuff, he goes to 11 on the volume every time.
Well, okay. So that was a question I have for you, because we're talking about, it's so funny. I actually just did a pod on Nicolas Cage. Like this, Zach Schoenfeld just wrote this book, actually, how Coppola became Cage, about Cage's early life. I don't know if you've seen this one yet or not. He was just on a couple days ago.
Okay.
It's a cool read. I've got about 75 books on my desk right now. Of like people are just like throwing books at me now because of the pod stuff. But I was talking to him, but I was wondering, like as you were writing this, and I guess the answer is yes on Cage, like is the process like, do you start to envision actors in these particular roles? Does that help to figure out who this person is? Or like, so how did that come along? You guys got the script and you start saying, wait, okay, Ben is this dude, and so forth.
We always wanted it to be a guy that you felt
He's
like,
so perfect.
Yeah. But you had to have him, like he was a Navy guy, so he was still athletic. Like we had to put that in there, but he was like, essentially he was a historian. We always envisioned the romance to be a nerd romance too. We wanted Abigail to be, both of them to be history nuts and to fall in love with each other because of their bond and their mutual love of history. So Nick Cage was always there. I mean, he's our favorite actor of all time. I mean, from what's the Coen Brothers movie that we love so much? Raising Arizona. Yeah. So we were always thinking of him, even when other names came up, and other names always come up. Cormac and I were always like, but it's got to be Nick Cage. It's just got to be Nick Cage. Finally, they decided, okay, well, we'll see if he wants to do it. So, but yeah, I don't know who we pictured for Abigail. I'm trying to think. We always do picture people when we're writing things.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the closest I can think of is the Whites from The Mummy. Maybe
Rachel Weisz.
Weisz, thank you.
I don't think the Mummy was.
But I don't think it was out yet. But that's the kind of actress probably that we were thinking, and we were thinking of a funny guy for Riley. We were thinking of, because Jack Black was living here in Hermosa Beach where we live, so we were thinking like a Jack Black type character, but he was too busy, too big, whatever. And ultimately, he would have been not right, because Justin Bartha is like the most perfect Riley that any of us could have ever imagined, and he was probably the last.
He was wonderful.
Yeah, he was hard. He was really hard to cast and to find, and he's one of John's really good friends now. I can't remember anybody else that we were envisioning. So.
he's got that Bartha has that great deadpan delivery throughout the film.
Yeah,
right.
He's
deadpan
amazing
with a smirk.
Yeah,
like deadpan with a
great
sense of humor. Yeah,
he is. If you meet John Turteltaub, they are a lot of the stuff that Justin does in scenes is them like very similar to John, like in real life, like that humor and that funny deadpan, but Justin's like, he's his own thing too. And he brought, like when we did the TV show and we brought Justin in for episode 4, he did a perfect Nick Cage, like, I'm going to go through the clues like Nick Cage did with 55 and Iron Pen. and what he did with La Boulier and all that stuff. That he's I'm going to do it like that, and he did the perfect Nick Cage. He's really funny. He's great.
All right, I have a bone to pick. Actually,
Yeah.
you're just talking about the romance. I'm gonna go into Book of Secrets here for a second. I don't like it when people break up. It makes me sad.
Well, okay, but when we were
I understand the necessity of it.
I totally understand. But when we were writing that one, we wanted it to reflect the Civil War. And so, like, what can we do? Well, we can break up the family. And
just like the Civil War, families.
And then by the end of this, let's see if we can get them back together again and maybe see.
Jason, until you said that, I didn't actually pick up on the fact that they broke.
It was like the first one.
To me, that was like the least interesting part, right?
Yeah, well, the first one we thought we were doing the Revolutionary War, so it was Patrick Gates was supposed to be like the father, like
right,
and he was the younger country, and so they were bringing, So then we went, okay, well, we'll do the Civil War with this one, and just you can't have everyone in love with each other. They had to be
pouting
at odds. And
I honestly didn't notice. I just was like, oh, it's the final scene because everybody's together in it. Oh, isn't that nice? Go ahead.
We don't like breakups either, but we did want, and we were watching it. We were like, we did love the humor of putting Nick and his dad, Ben and Patrick back in the house together, living in a house together. We thought we could mine that for some fun humor. So there was a lot of things like that you're just like, as writers, you're just trying to figure out situations. But ultimately it was the Civil War. I mean, we started there. It was like the very first thing we came up with was after the president of Disney came to us and said, we're making this movie in August. We had no script. We're making this movie in August. I want the Statue of Liberty, the Eiffel Tower, Buckingham Palace, and Mount Rushmore on the poster. Go. That was literally how it started. Wow. And the first thing we came up with was Cormac was saying that that was the Civil War. What do we do with the characters?
I mean, that's how North by Northwest was written. So we were like, okay, we'll just write from just one monument to another and see if we can do it. And so we had to figure out, how can we tie the Eiffel Tower into the Resolute Test, which in our research, we were like, oh my God, that ship that they divided
RMS,
up, the RMS, it's almost the Charlotte. Because it did end up locked.
No. I think the Charlotte was based on that, not knowing that when we
not knowing it
in the first movie, and then for it to surface in the second. And that's why historical research is like a writer's savior, because you a lot of these clues we wanted to come up with the Resolute desks, but when you read that there's these twin desks that made it from a boat that's similar to the one in the first movie that spawned all sorts of ideas. So
yeah, you guys don't get to see it when you watch the movies, but Marianne had this whole flow chart, and literally it's the craziest flow chart of clues and timelines and how it all came about. And we would give it to the producers. And in fact, the writer that's working on the third one right now, they're like, can we have your flow chart from the second one?
It's silly. It's not.
It's a crazy.
It's a basically like explain it to me as if I was a kindergartner sort of version of it. Just so that, because it gets so complicated that, and in fact, at one point, I think Chad Oman, one of the producers at Bruckheimer, there's a beat in two, and I can't remember what it was exactly. And it was between Paris and America and some information that was passed, and it was like overnight the information was passed, and he goes, so how did they get that message to them overnight? Did they have FedEx? And I was like, and I can't remember what the clue was, and I think we changed it after that, but it was it's like, oh yeah, they had ships, and it took them a long time to get there.
That as an early American historian, I occasionally get very specific questions like that, like the TV series Turn about spies and the American Revolution. I once got an email, ended up being a phone call by someone who was writing for that, and they wanted to know what happened in military camps during the Revolution with mail. Like, how did they get it? Where did it come from? Tell us about mail. And it was very specific. I'm sure I'm sorry to say, I have not watched it. However, they wanted to know that specific detail, which to me is like, okay, if you actually care, it's kind of, thumbs up from a historian for bothering to ask.
Right. I just listened to Eric Larson's book on Fort Sumner's, and Captain Anderson gets a lot of mail, and I'm like, how's he getting all this mail? And isn't Charlton? Aren't they a little pissed off at him? Are they actually delivering his mail to him? Okay, I guess so.
But what I love about your flow chart is, as well as the echoes of the historian's craft that are in the making of the movie and in the movie itself are really striking. And this is one of those ways, right? Where you're digging and you find something and it reminds you of something. And then it might be the father of the person it reminded you of. And, oh no, they belong to this club. Who else is in the club? And you end up doing that same sort of thing in which you're all over the place trying to put something together, and it makes sense and you can kind of see where it's going, but it's very complicated. And then you have to figure out how to put it together and express it so that someone can understand it. So like, I remember in my last book, I was describing a physical fight in the House of Representatives in like the 1850s, I think. And like a big brawl in front of the speaker's desk, and like lots and lots and lots of people running at each other and punching each other and pulling their hair, right? Any number of other things. So I dig all over the place and I find like diaries and letters and newspaper accounts and all of these little things. And then I had to like delve through them to figure out what actually happened, which was really hard because that's an event that gets people very excited. And so they were, it was very hard to figure out what happened. When I finally figured it out and could tell the story, I actually ran down to the lobby of my writing office in New York City and told the doorman. I figured
That's awesome.
I figured out the story. So the flow chart makes perfect sense.
Good. I'm glad.
I've got a question for you actually on the production of like the film, because so much of like when we're talking about these, I'm talking with other scholars and stuff like that. Usually people are going to come on the pod and we're kind of tying in a film to like a movie and things like that. Like Greg Agigian just wrote this cool book about the history of like UFO sightings, right? We did Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which was so much fun to talk about and stuff. And we get to talk a lot about like the production of historical books, right? Like Joanne's work and stuff like that. But I don't know that our audience really gets a sense of like what happens when you write a screenplay. Like as you were writing that, is there a point where you turn it in and it's hands off, or like what happens as you are crafting this and then where does it go after you've submitted? Like what happens?
That's a really good question. Well, first, I'll start from the beginning a little bit because you get hired,
please.
You get the scripts and you go through them all. And then we make decisions and you're pitching constantly ideas. Like for instance, one of the bigger changes was the family story, the redemption story, like the script that we read after the National Archives, which is a different caper completely, but after the National Archives caper, they went right into a caper at the Smithsonian. And Cormac and I were working on it for the longest time. We were like, this just feels so episodic. And we just were bored. As writers, we were bored. Even though the clues were cool and then playing and whatever. And like, it was going to be funny swinging in the Smithsonian. And we just couldn't. We got writer's block. And I still remember there was a hometown fair and we were walking through it and we had writer's block. And for like 3 weeks, which is terrible for writing because you're supposed to be done with a script in like 8 months. And as you guys know, always behind deadlines if you're writers. And so, and then I think Cormac, I think it was you. I think he said, you know what we need to do? We need to give him a task that he has to go back and talk to his dad. We need to give him a task that's the last thing he wants to do in this world because he's just stolen the Declaration of Independence. We're never going to get anything worse than that. So now he's got to do something that's emotionally worse. I didn't know I was going to have to go talk to my dad. I love that line. If I had to go talk to my dad. And so that was like, those are kind of decisions that you make as you're going, right? So that was that big change. So as writers, as we go along, we're doing that. We're coming up with these set pieces, whatever. And then you turn it in and then you get a bazillion more notes. I mean, it's like constantly development is constant. It's like, you get the notes from the producers, Jerry Bruckheimer, you get the notes from John Troldheim, you get the notes from his producers, because they all have producers, many producers on each group. And then all the notes from the studio, which we didn't have to deal with so much because Jerry would filter through those for us. And then finally, when they're ready, when they think it's good enough, then they go out to cast. And Disney, I don't know, was Disney motivated to make the movie, or was it cast contingent? I can't remember.
No, they were motivated.
They were motivated. So they were going out with offers to actors. A lot of times in the movie industry, you don't have a lot of juice. You try to send it to somebody who say that they want to make it, and then you have juice, and then you can go try to sell it. Well, we were already set up at Disney, which was good. And Disney wanted to make it. And we just needed the actors. And so they went out with offers, an offer to Nick. And I don't remember how long it took, but once he was on board, then we had to go movie. And then you do more notes. And you're doing notes all the way through on the set. You're doing notes because something doesn't work, like in National Treasure 2, we had to come out to the tippy big set piece in the cave with the thing tipping, and John was trying to envision how it was going to work, and so you're there, you're trying to troubleshoot with the set directors and the set builders and stuff like that. So it's a lot of that, and then or sometimes.
So it's a long process. It's a long process of pitching a story, of writing an outline, of writing a screenplay, of actually turning in pages, of getting feedback, getting notes. And when the writer's finally done with it, then it starts in production, and the director and the actors are gonna shape it their way a lot more. And that's not to say that John's way wasn't shaped in the writing of it. But like what Marianne's alluding to, we're in a vacuum when we're writing. We don't know. And when we came up with for the idea, in the original draft, Ben Gates still takes the Abigail character, wasn't Abigail, but takes the character and on a date, and he basically just steals the key off of her and robs it, and he used her
to get into the,
and so
didn't seem as chivalrous.
We were like, well, he's going to be more chivalrous, and John had gone on this tour of all these places, and he'd given us a video cassette of oh, here it is at the archives. This is what it looks like, and he had given us a Declaration of Independence, and it had a little sticker on it for how much it cost. And we were like, this is the funniest thing in the world. Okay, he bought us
a souvenir
they must have a gift shop there. So Marianne and I we got to put that in. We got to have Ben Gates steal it and go buy another one, and then escape, and then suddenly get caught with Abigail, and then have to rescue her.
And it was
or help her.
Yeah, it was fun because using her versus her confronting him saying, give me that thing back, you bastard, basically. And then her getting captured by the bad guys, and then him knowing she has the wrong one. He could let her go. He doesn't need to go save her. And then he goes and saves her. And then you find out that she had the wrong one the whole time. It just made it much more fun. And much more her. She had more agency in that one because she was coming to go, you bad man, you give me that back right now.
Well, I think that's the cool part that you see in the character, right? At least certainly, especially in the first film, is he's always got this protective thing about him, right? When they're at the Charlotte, when the whole idea about stealing the Declaration of Independence is about protecting it from Ian getting it to the first place, right? It's like, okay, now that we've got it, let's keep going, right? But it's much more. He's defensive and constantly trying to. I mean, very much seeing himself. I mean, he said, what did he say earlier? He's a history protector.
Yeah. Or something. I was about to say so he's doing all this stuff to steal the Declaration of Independence, and at the same time he has reverence for the Declaration of Independence, even with the blow dryer and the lemon juice. He communicates the fact that he's practical and he needs to see the back, but like the line about the last time that the document was in this room, it was being signed. Mm-hmm. You do manage, and as a historian, you asked at the very beginning what hooked me. What I love about the movie is the paperness of it. right? It's the focus on manuscripts and papers and documents and making them exciting and the sense of discovery. You know, you're looking for a treasure and we're looking for some key piece of information, but the way in which the movie puts manuscripts at the center of it and interpreting history at the center of it, you know, I call myself an archive rat because I just love being in archives and digging and seeing what I can come up with. And I'm definitely not the only historian. And that was one of the great things about the movie. And it was smart. Not, you know, I don't think you deliberately said this will appeal to historians who are digging for treasure, digging for history information. But that connection was pretty cool in the movie.
That's awesome. And then we do feel that way. We feel the exact same way when we're digging. We're digging for ideas and we're digging. And that Silence Do Good thing was just so much fun because we were just like, how do we find something? What else did Ben Franklin do that we can, you know, because of the glasses and all this stuff. And then I don't know how we stumbled on.
Well, my dad was a newspaper man and he used to tell that story. He used to tell Silence Do Good letters. And then
there you go.
And I think Marianne probably just found it. And I was like, oh yeah, there's a story. I know this story. And so, but that's the core of the thing. Whereas the previous incarnations of he was a treasure hunter. When we did it, he's a treasure protector. He wants to protect it. So when his father had destroyed their family by going after that treasure, Ben wanted to reunite the family. And what he had to do was he had to steal the Declaration of Independence. And Marianne and I felt like to do something so horrible that he's trying to save the family name and to do something so horrible, it's to the core of who he really is. And we felt like that's his big arc in his journey. But Ted and Terry wrote a really good piece at the end where he learns to bluff. And he bluffs Ian. And which feels like a really good arc, but that really wasn't what we intended. Like he learns to lie. That's not we did.
As any good person does.
It was fun.
It works. It works really well. And they also
because it's family lying.
And they also wrote the scene in the False Treasure Room where Patrick Gates is saying, "Don't you see? You did succeed." Yeah, and that was a very important scene.
Because it was like, it was here. You did find it.
And we aren't crazy. You did what you set out to do.
Exists.
Whether you found the treasure or not, you succeeded in making our family whole before we find the treasure. And that was an important scene. And I got those guys.
Ted. But I will say also, we always went in with the intention, and Jerry Bruckheimer was very clear about this. First of all, no guns for Ben. No guns on the sides of the good guys. And then the second, because he wanted to be his first PG-13 movie. And then the second thing he wanted was Ben does not get to keep the treasure. Doesn't get to keep it. He's going to give it away. So that's how we wrote it. And that's how the first screening went terribly because he didn't get it. And the audience.
Really?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And so we had to do the reshoots. And you'll pay attention if you ever watch it again. When Abigail's in the park with Riley and they're trying to negotiate with Sadusky and Ian trying to arrange a meeting and you can tell Riley like has a wig on or she has a wig on, like their hair is like a little quite different because they got off to do other movies. It was months later. Oh, so they're going to have to go shoot this new thing where they're
it's the new scene at the mansion.
That's one.
Scene.
Yeah,
that's the new scene. That's the new scene that we had to do we had to just tag that on at the end. But Jerry was not wrong. And in fact, you can see his edict to us on the second one was you have to take everything away from them. They can't be rich and whatever, which is, plays in our whole thing of he loses Abigail. He loses everything. Riley's lost everything and they're starting over from zero. And that was really smart. And we're like, oh, we just watched it last night. We're like, oh, we got there fast. He's living with his dad. He's got nothing.
He's got no taxes.
Riley has nothing.
I have a question for you, though, related to that. So my father was in the movie business, and he did marketing. And one of the things that he would do is, go to screenings and have focus groups and, people like judging scenes with little dials and all these different things. And then we were kids. We'd get paid $1 to sort questionnaires about the movie, whatever the movie was. And sometimes the questionnaires would ask about the endings of movies. And what you get was people saying, I don't like the ending. And, my father would go away and say, well, the ending doesn't work. And I remember at the time feeling like, but these people are writers and they wrote a story and now you're going to make them change the ending. So what happens to you? How do you feel when someone says, yeah, that ending didn't work?
In that one, we figured out how to bridge the gap, how to let him give the treasure to the people that needed to have the treasure, which was the historians in the countries that the treasure belonged to, but also give him a percent. So we kind of satisfied everybody by showing that Riley had a nice car, showing that Abigail and Ben had a mansion now that belonged to a famous person in history. So it felt like they had gotten rich, which they had, but we still said, but the treasure belongs to the people and the civilizations where it came from. But it was, and it happens all the time. I mean, the testing thing is really hard. In television, they do it all, and it could be something like, at the beginning of for bad example, because this is a good example actually, but in Beverly Hills Cop 1, his best friend is killed at the beginning of the movie, right? Or one of his friends. In television testing, that would have gotten a 0 on the dial because they would be sad that his best friend just got killed. But the best friend getting killed drives the whole rest of the movie, right? So it's like, the people who read the dials, it's like, it's tough. Then you have to go in and go, well, they're feeling sad, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. But in this treasure hunt movie, I mean, we kind of agreed. We wanted Ben and Riley to get some cash. We did. So it was fun.
Yeah. There's this, I guess, there's a sense then of like, everybody's happy towards the end. Whereas, if you kill off the best friend at the beginning, it's like, okay, you've got an hour and a half to get over it. I was like, who? What? No, it's fine. He's got a Ferrari and he's got a girlfriend now. It's fine. I want to ask you, this is not your only film. So I don't want to put you on the spot with this particular film, but are there other challenges like as screenwriters that present to you like on a basis, are there other difficulties as we talk about the historian's craft all the time, but like, what else, are there other things particular to your craft that are difficult? Maybe not necessarily to this film. I don't want to put you on the spot saying, oh, this one thing happened or whatever, but like production companies, directors, actors, like the having stuff given to you, like what's the beats of your life how's that career like?
From a screenwriter, it's completely different problems than what a director has to do and what actors have to do. So I don't know if I can speak for that because, if you're an actor, you're putting yourself out there and you want to make sure that every word you say is something that you could believe and whatnot.
And then you don't look like a fool because it's on celluloid forever. And
then the director has to make sure his vision those jobs are so much harder in my opinion.
Well, they're grueling too.
I think the hardest thing for us, and Joanne helped us, was when we were doing the TV show. It had gotten to such a point that they were using you couldn't deviate from history, and everything had to be literal, and it really made it really hard for us to write the show because we were like, can't we just lift the fun things out and sweep the other stuff underneath so that people can watch it and go, that's really interesting. I didn't know that, and do their own research So if you have that attitude, I think writers are great. We can do that. We'll give you the truthiness of it, and then you can research the rest and find the rest. This wasn't a thesis that we wrote. So that made it hard for us on the TV show.
And with the TV show also, it was made during a time when everybody was it was during the whole time when it was like stay in your lane. We were developing that right in the height of that. So Disney had hired literally the Smithsonian to be one of our experts. And two other groups were experts, and every script had to go through these 3 groups to make sure that we didn't hurt anyone's feelings. And I believe in that. I'm happy, but it really made it so hard for us, But
it's that bicycle thing. It's like, well, there's no way that these two people would have talked to each other. And yeah, but nobody in the audience
is going to know.
Can't we just pretend like they met at a spa somewhere?
Well, okay. I think that's the brilliance in these films, though, is like they play with history.
That's
right? It's not.
That's what makes
Joanne,
it okay for historians. Like you just said, Cormac, the word truthiness. And if you have the right spirit and you have a sense of play and you have a sense of humor with it, so that you don't appear to be making pronouncements about history, but really, you're talking about history in a one step back, fun kind of way, and yet informed enough that people want to be engaged. That I don't think that's an easy target to hit. But I think that's one of the things that makes this movie and movies that manage to do that as well, something that you can get past the bicycle people who can't get past the dates. And as you just said, that person could never have met that person. It could never have happened. It's like, it's a movie. I know it's not true. It's a movie. And it's cool that they met in the movie.
Yeah. And Cormac always likes to go, yeah, but E.T. isn't real either. Like, it's kind of, come on, you guys.
And any one of those stories.
How dare you, sir?
Anyone that says based on a true story, it's based on, nothing's truthful in here. And when they say based on a true story.
The answer, though, to your question, I think our jobs, when we're not in production, our jobs are a lot like what you guys do. You try to come up with an idea for a book. Like you guys have to publish a lot, right? You try to find something in a letter, you see something in a letter, you're like, oh my God, this is a big fight that happened in the House of Representatives. Oh my God, I could write a whole book about this. And then you have to go pitch it probably to a publisher or to an agent or something. I don't know how it works.
Well, you got to convince other historians that it's important.
There you go.
Not when you're Joanne. Okay, when Joanne says she wants to do a thing, it's greenlit. I'm just saying. So she's playing down.
And that happens with the big screenwriters too. So it is kind of similar. But, and then you got to convince all these different, and then you got to write it. And a lot of times you're not being paid to write it. Like sometimes that's why you write something on spec. A lot of times Cormac and I got paid to write something. They would bring us in on a show, on a thing. Charlie's Angels 2, I think, was one where we had already done something and they wanted us to come in. They hired us and then we came in to try to help them with it. That was in production. But when you're not in production and you're just trying to pitch ideas, come up with ideas, write things, constantly try to keep writing, so that we always say it's a muscle that you have to keep, you have to work out every day. A lot of reading scripts. So that's the job of the life. You said daily life of a screenwriter. That's trying to get pages done, 5 pages a day. And we're pretty happy with ourselves. If we don't, then we're pretty miserable. And then probably the same with you guys. You probably have goals. And then if you're in production, it's a completely different thing. It's sleepless and it's sets and it's dealing with the worst thing is conflicting notes. The worst thing, if you're on a set and 2 actors disagree with, or 2 actors want the same line, like you wrote a line that they're like, no, I should say that. Like you give the line to the underling, it's a good line, and you've given it to the underling character, and the movie star says, no, that should be my line. And then you're like, but wait, the other person said that, so the line is not right here. So that sort of stuff. It's a lot of that. It's a lot of negotiating politics. Well, politics. But it's fun. I'm not going to.
I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to ask you about what's on it. You already know. How often do you get asked about page 47?
We get asked all the time. And when we were on the set of our show, we got asked all the time. And we were like,
wait, now, what's the significance of your page 47?
Oh, this is a secret.
Oh, you mean?
Well, there's a Pomona College where I went to college. The number 47 is its magical number.
Oh, wow.
And it's on everything. It's on T-shirts. It's the 47th exit on the freeway. It's like,
really?
And apparently when there are Pomona people who are writers in entertainment, they shove 47s into entertainment because it's like the magical number. So as soon as you said that, Jason, I was like, oh, wait, is this Pomona 40?
I would have to tell.
Our lawyer went there.
It is now.
Yeah, our lawyer went to Pomona College. It's funny, 47, and yes, we get asked all the time. We weren't sure the third movie was going to get made, so we had set it upon ourselves to maybe answer the question in this show. But then then they decided that they really do want to make the third movie. So they're trying to figure that out now, and they have an idea for 47. But I will say 47 was not 47. And I didn't remember this until John Turteltaub did an interview with Aubrey and Emily, the Treasure Hunt podcast girls, ladies, that he said the number was actually like 233. Tell me what's on page 233. And I don't remember this. I always remember it as 47. And he said 233 would be like in the 80s. Like we want to go back in time a little bit, like when the book was still only, 50 pages thick. So he picked 47. So we'll have to ask him why 47, but I would be
curious to know.
Yeah. That was a whole set decoration thing, trying to make a book that he didn't want to make 200 pages thick of old parchment, so you're working with the prop guy, and the prop guy is making this book.
I'm going to have to look at one of our old scripts. That's a good story by John, but I don't. and I give John a lot of credit for a lot of things, but that's interesting. I don't think Marianne and I ever knew, and it was just. And by the way, Jerry doesn't like to end a movie and act like you're going to have another movie, because it's sort of being smug, and he doesn't like it. So
he's a very humble guy.
He's very humble guy. So we were just like, somehow it got in there.
I hate that. You guys have referenced the third film. That's, I guess, in production now. Finally,
it's not in production.
No, it's not in production.
They're writing the script.
Okay.
The script is in production.
I think that I've had more discussions about, there's a common thing goes around Twitter. You see it all the time. Why didn't we get a sequel to this movie? Why didn't we get a sequel to that? And things like that. These films are phenomenally popular. Was there a reason that we just never got to see it, or what? Because, oh my gosh, I love these movies.
Well, we do. We've heard the excuses.
Well, I mean,
at first it was.
Why are you pointing at me?
Because, you
because you said E.T. was a real.
Well, this is it's an embarrassment of riches for Disney. It was opportunity cost. They started getting these Marvel movies and the Star Wars movies, and they're like, well, we make $1 billion here. If we make another National Treasure, we might make
300, 400.
So it just became, what movie is going to make the money, and ours just wasn't going to make that kind of money for them. And now I think the tides maybe turned, and we were shocked. We went down to Comic-Con for the TV show, and we were surprised to find that there were so many fans down there. And we texted John. We said, John, you need to come down here because the people care about this movie. And I don't think because we had no idea. We didn't know that anyone cared.
We walked into that hall, whatever, you've probably been, we had never been before. And there's people waiting out lines in these halls to go see, like there was a Marvel movie, whatever. So when we walked into our hall with 5,000 people in there, we were like, oh, they're all here for the Marvel movie that is after us, because it was going to be like, and they go, no, that line's still outside. This is the National Treasure. And we were like, really? So we couldn't believe it.
So it feels like the time's coming. Like you said, we were surprised that there were these people would come up to us and go, I love history because of it, or whatever. We're like, oh, really? Because,
people have said that to
all
me
the time.
Too.
And we didn't know, we had no idea. And it sort of feels like it's ready now. There's whole generation has grown up and watched it, just like they did the second Top Gun. It's like people were ready for it. They wouldn't have been ready for a Top Gun 10 years earlier, but they're ready now. And I think they're ready for Ben Gates to show up and maybe make sense of our country.
Talking about that, I have to mention a line at the end that made me gasp. This is a line that 20 years ago would not. Towards the very end, I think when they're talking about the treasure, they've already found the treasure, and I think it's Nicolas Cage who says that the Masons, the Knights Templar, they did not want one man to have this much power, just like the founders didn't want one man to have that much power. I'm just not going to say anything about the Supreme Court at all, right? But in this moment, in this historical moment, I was like, oh. It has added meaning now.
Yeah, boy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. That's why Ben, he's ready to come back.
And he's got to clarify some things.
So got to clarify some things.
But what I love is what you just said about, and people have said to me, I love history because of this movie. That gets back to what we talked about earlier, which is that it does capture something of like the hunt. That's when I'm teaching undergrads and they begin their research. I'm like, you're going to go on the hunt now. You're going to be finding things and asking questions. And that's captured in the movie. So people who like history and they like the clues and they like the story and they like the narrative. But the movie isn't just about the story. It's about looking for it, right? And finding it, digging for it. And that's the craft of history. So people are going to love history because it's about history, but that's also going to, oddly enough, in a way that probably doesn't happen very often, make what historians do look a little dramatic and glamorous. It's not very dramatic and glamorous, I will say, again, sitting in a room by yourself looking at old pieces of paper. But it kind of puts a little bit of a sheen on the process of like digging for information to come up with the story.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
I think people like those little bit of like edutainment sort of moments, like, like you tell them, oh, you're watching a sporting event, it's a real barn burner. Oh, you know where the word barn burner comes from? And it's like those sort of little trivias of like burning the barn to get rid of rats. Like, wait a minute, someone would go that. Those little bits of trivia, I think people like it. And it makes them want to go, oh, wait, there were people that acted that way, because we have those people now.
I wonder, I hadn't realized we're 20 years in from this film now. This movie comes out in 2004. I don't know when you had begun work on this. Do you get tired of talking about this movie? Like I was very meekly when I reached out to you guys about doing this. I was like, I kind of know we kind of know each other, but would you mind? Do you ever get tired of of the enthusiasm for this film? Do you get the same kind of questions? What happens?
I'm telling you, we didn't until recently get a ton of.
No one ever talked about it. No one ever talked about it.
Are you serious?
No one ever talked about it. We were like when the first movie previewed, we were actually having lunch with Ted Elliott, who's writing the third one, and who's a very smart guy.
Pirates of the Caribbean.
He's Pirates of the Caribbean. He's really a good writer and he's a really fun guy. But I remember we were sitting there and he goes, oh yeah, they previewed it last night and it got a standing ovation. And we're like, oh, wow. So people liked it. And then it opened like that Friday and the reviews hated it.
Yeah.
And so Marianne and I were just walking around like, oh,
we were so bummed.
They hate our movie. Oh, it's just horrible. And then we never heard anything again, except for, it's doing pretty well in the box office. But nobody ever like, hey, do you want to talk? No one until, then they decided they were going to make a TV show and then people were
and the Comic-Con thing. And like Cormac said, people got to a certain age and then we started getting people reach out to us. We don't have Twitter anymore, but people started reaching out to us on Twitter, or I think we do have.
I was going to ask what changed, and this gets us. You're right. That partly social media.
I think it's age because people now, like a gal. I wish I knew her name. I would give her a shout out. She reached out to us to say, the movie inspired me. I'm now getting my doctorate, in history, and it was like that just meant so much to us. And then the Comic-Con thing, and then a really funny story when Cormac and I were pitching. This show called Black Samurai with a Common, who's the rapper, I don't know if you know him, and the Wu-Tang Clan. Like really, like talk about two completely out of style, out of touch, like older people pitching a show with like the coolest group of people that walk in. Like they walk into a room and it's like an entourage of like just rock stars. The RZA and the Wu-Tang Clan and Common and his people, and they walk in, and then we were always just falling behind. We were just the little story writer people, just kind of hiding in the background with our little folder of notes that we were going to pitch. And we got into a room, and the assistants said, I just have to say, and Cormac and I weren't paying attention because we were just like, oh yeah, they're going to get RZA's autograph or something. And she goes, or the two sisters are like, we just have to tell you that National Treasure is like our favorite movie of all time, and we just said thank you so much, right? And we couldn't have been more shocked and like more touched. But that was like,
I love it.
you're in a room with all these rock stars and you're like that was like a moment I thought, and they were like, we grew up on that movie. We watched it all the time. My family, this and that, always my family. We watched it every Thanksgiving, with my grandparents. And it's like a multi-generational movie. Little kids, and Jerry wanted it to be this way. Jerry wanted, that's what this, back to the PG-13 thing. He wanted a Jerry Bruckheimer action movie that kids could watch with their family.
And of course, the movie is multi-generational too. So that's sort of sweet, that connection.
Yeah.
I watched it this morning with my son, Benjamin.
All right.
Nice.
Oh, yeah. No, and Ben is absolutely named after Ben Franklin. I saw it to Joanne earlier today. Like, Ben and I were sitting there watching it. He also said he wanted to say good job. He's 12. He's like, hey, tell them I said good job. So
that means so much to us.
That's
What?
No, I love it. No, I have to tell you guys, like, what this film has turned out. It's been such an unlikely thing for me, and I really mean this. It's given me so many friendships as a result of like just stumbling into finding out that people love this movie. I mean, just genuinely love it. And then the whole thing that like emerged over the last 6 years because of what you guys did. And I'm not kidding. Like, if you look on the tagline for this little thing, I always say, it says like, someday we're going to steal the Declaration of Independence on the podcast, because it's like, because of what you guys created. It's been such an amazing, I don't know, ride. Like I'm in awe. I just, I can't tell you how happy I am.
Kind. And I hope that, everyone involved can hear that. Like we were saying, it wasn't originally our idea. And obviously so much of it is John Turteltaub. But we watched the second one last night, and just the little touches of like the backup camera and the dog sniffing the backup camera.
Yeah, or when they're in the Library of Congress and Ben is standing on the top and taking the books down, and Riley's having to like all these old books, and the comedy of Riley, like another book is being stacked in his arm. Like just little comedy touches.
Just those little touches, like the delicious jams and jellies. That's just right out of John's mouth.
Listen, I'm a fan of his. Like I'm going to get on the pod at some point in time. I'm like, I'll lure him with other history nerds at some point in time.
Yeah.
Because he's delightful. He's very well spoken, unlike me. I mean, he's like one of those Toastmaster type guys. You could just bring John into a room
and say, "Hey, give a speech."
And he'll give the speech. In fact, the original, when we got handed this project, we met with John for probably 2 weeks on how the story should be broken. And every time we pitched it, John was like, "No, that doesn't work. It's horrible. It doesn't work." And then Jerry walked in the room, and Jerry goes, "So what do you got?" And Marianne and I like, "Oh no, John hates everything." So we weren't ready to say it. And John pitched what we'd been talking about to Jerry
in such an eloquent,
a great way that Jerry goes, "That's it, let's go." And we're like, "Oh my God." You were saying you didn't like anything for 2 weeks, and then you pitched everything we were talking about. You made it sound great. Jerry likes it, and now we're gonna have to go write it.
But that's just John's process. I think he was trying to convince himself.
You know what I thought of, because of course, I'm a historian. I think about books. There's a wonderful book by the historian Pauline Maier called American Scripture. And it's about the writing of the Declaration of Independence, but also about the reverence and how it gets lowered under the ground and all of the sort of stuff that you show in your movies. So, of course, that was also, I popped into my head that American Scripture, meaning it's kind of a sort of holy document for Americans. And so, the movie captures that kind of reverence for the document that which makes it exciting and crazy to steal it, right? That because it's that document.
And it's in a bulletproof case. Which we
That's a great shot with holding it with the yeah.
The fact that
that would be funny if you could block a bullet with it. It saves his life.
There are founding documents like that are in, careful and kept out of the sun and preserved, and that all by itself is pretty amazing about protecting history.
Yeah.
That stuff was really fun to research and to learn that they go to those extents to protect the document. And then it helped us write the caper, because once we found out that they had this special preservation room and that they do these things, that they lower it when, to whatever, we were like, that's the caper. Now we got it. You know, it was like really helped us. Otherwise, it would have been breaking in the National Guard and trying to take it out of its case in the middle of the night. Like, not as fun. You know,
It's amazing.
Yeah.
We've been talking about the last 20 years for the last hour. What's next? What's on the docket for you guys? So, like, what are you guys doing now? Like, was there anything coming up? Like, obviously, aside from having, coffee with two historians here today, like,
well, we writers were, first of all, we had that strike that like hurt. We didn't get our season 2 for the show. So that was a bummer. So we've written, writing a couple of things that we hope to get going. We have a project that's actually a thriller that we're trying to get going that we can't really talk about because nothing's really happening with it yet, but we're trying, so you just kind of keep, and every day you just kind of try and come up with more ideas. We're working on, so we have that one, and then we're working on like another psychological sort of fun action thriller thing right now. So, like that's sort of our day to day is trying to keep the instrument sharp.
Sure. Guys, I'm such a fan. This was the thing I've been giddy about. It's been like a really weird last couple of weeks here. And I hope this doesn't sound weird, but I was like, this was like the little thing I had on my schedule. I was like, I couldn't really tell anybody because I wanted this to be a surprise actually to the HATM community because people love this thing so I haven't told anybody. Joanne has.
I mistakenly did on my webcast, but I told them it's a secret. So we'll see if they can keep it a secret.
That could be along the lines. It'd be like, National Treasure and the webcast of secrets. So
because I was excited. I've been looking forward to doing this for this reason, right? I mean, history, popular culture, movies, just getting to hang out with the people who make the thing, and because that original moment for HATM, Jason, that was beyond fun for me to have the community there and to basically have people watching me watch the movie. It was hilariously fun because they all knew it because they loved it. And it was beyond fun. So it led to all of this wonderful stuff for you, Jason, which I'm really thrilled about. And it was fun on top of it.
Yeah.
I love it.
It's scary for us.
It was super scary.
Scary for us, but
because we were the same.
I cannot believe that's so. Yeah.
Well, you probably thought we were all going to be bicycle people, right?
A little bit. I mean, we knew we were going to get it for the lemon stuff, and we didn't really delve too far in.
Everyone loved the lemon stuff. That was the amazing thing. Everybody was like, Joanne lost her mind, and then we all started laughing. I have Joanne's tweet bookmarked.
I mean, if you want to be technical, you would say, who has that many lemons in the refrigerator?
Thank you. Right? Like, what?
I never thought about
What is John Voight's? Yeah.
What is this thing?
John Voight?
It's got a lemon tree. There's a neighbor that this lady, she has a lemon tree. She keeps giving him lemons once a day.
How many recipes have lemonade? I mean, lemonade is big. And I don't know.
It's pretty funny.
He just had them in his fridge. It's like, I have to preserve these lemons for just the occasion. And then, Ben has to know that he's got lemons. It's like, Dad will have them.
Yeah.
Dad will have them.
Dad will have them. We don't need to bring anything. Dad will have them. He's got the lemons.
Just in case this ever happens, he'll have and Q-tips galore. He'll have just the right ones.
And a hair dryer.
He doesn't
and a hair dryer.
He doesn't have much hair.
You're right.
See, we picked it apart.
We've ruined our own. This is awesome. That is exactly what we were hoping. This was actually Historians at the Movies, and the last of National Treasure is what this was. So now that we've driven the stake into into the heart of the film, it's like, no, of course there's some love. Yeah. So. Guys, thank you so much for being here. This has been amazing. I have been so looking forward to it. I am so glad that you guys agreed to come on. All three of you, actually. I don't want to shortchange Joanne, who happens to also be awesome. So, guys, thank you so much for taking time to be here.
I'm thrilled to have the chance after that wonderful connection with Jason orchestrating it to get to see you guys in person.
Yeah, we're super excited to have, after having met you, and just always impressed with everything that you're doing. And we feel real honored. Like, you guys are so smart.
Yeah.
So
we're dummies.
Yeah, we're stoked. So it was fun. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing this, Jason.
And that's a wrap here at Historians of the Movies podcast. Thank you so very much to our guests, Cormac Wibberley, Marianne Wibberley, and of course, Joanne Freeman. Guys, thank you so very much for being here. Thank you, of course, to our producer, Fletcher Powell, for continuing to make this show run. And to you guys, if you like this pod, please keep leaving messages, leaving reviews, sharing this with your friends, and neighbors and enemies and everyone else in between. Thank you so much for being here. Guys, this has been amazing. 6 years in, we're doing HATM. God damn it, I guess we're going to go for another 6. So let's keep going. Thanks for being here, guys. Ciao for now.